Well, Yenzi, another young U.S. cyclist on the podcast today, fresh off of finishing his first ever Tour de France, recovering, going straight into Classica San Sebastian and being in the front group, and then capping it off this last weekend in Glasgow with a great breakaway representation for the U.S. and top 20 finish. Kevin Vermaerke joins us. What did you think of the chat?
It was fantastic, especially to have somebody straight out of the World Championships, because they were so hard, so spectacular. And I was just curious to hear from somebody that was inside of all the carnage and action. So it was absolutely fantastic. And he's a pretty good talker as well.
Can you do you think he's like rewatching it right now to see how big of a boss he looked on TV being in the front with those guys? I mean, that course was insane, but probably one of the most entertaining races I've seen. Only it was started to be entertaining with over 150 kilometers to go. And he was there in the breakaway. The real special part for me that I hope he goes back and watches if he hasn't seen it before is when he got to come through the line as the leader of the race with, like, I think that was 4 or 5 laps to go, but that must have been something special.
For sure, it was special for him, and very sure it gave him that idea in the back of his mind. Maybe in 2 years' time, I actually can do the same thing with only 1 lap to go and maybe go for the big one. I mean, he's still young, you mentioned it, 22 years old only. So yes, he has a chance of actually one day running a podium, become a medalist at the World Championships.
You hit the nail on the head there, Yenzi. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation with Kevin Vermaerke. All right, everyone. You saw him on TV last Sunday with the Stars and Stripes, showing it with pride, strength, character. Kevin Vermaerke, welcome to Bobby and Jens.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Man, you know, normally we kind of build into the podcast, but that was such an amazing race last Sunday, and you were such a major part of it. We gotta just start with that. We gotta geek out on that, because that to me was one of the most fun, exciting races to watch on TV. And I won't lie to you, I got up a little bit late. I missed the protest. I missed you getting into the break, but I didn't miss you coming onto the circuits with a 5-minute lead or 4.5-minute lead. So yeah, man, give us the rundown to those of us that missed it, what that protest was like, how that time, you know, I guess it was almost an hour that you guys had to sit around, you know, like what you guys did. And then once it started, for you to jump into the breakaway.
Yeah, so it's I mean, feels like so much happened over the weekend. You know, Worlds is already one of the longest races on the calendar, but with an extra hour waiting around for the protest, it felt extra long this year. I think it was about maybe 70K into the race. The commissar stopped us, and they didn't let us up to the protesters, so we were probably 100 or 200 meters down the road, and, you know, actually didn't see the people on the road, but you know, they told us they had glued themselves. Initially, that's what they said, to the road, and the police were coming. I guess the race organizers weren't allowed to touch the protesters, so they had to call in the police and wait for them to come. And then, yeah, I mean, you know, you expect it to take 5, maybe 10 minutes to get these guys off the road and for the race to restart. But in the end, it was 50 minutes that we were waiting there on the road. And luckily it wasn't raining, because if it had been raining, it would have been crazy. I don't know what they would have done, because it was pretty, you know, it wasn't cold, but it was pretty chilly, especially when you were stopped for 10, 20 and, you know, almost an hour on the road. It got pretty cold. So yeah, luckily it wasn't raining, but, you know, I think being in the breakaway, we could make the most of it. And, you know, for me, we all 9 of us in the break, we hopped in the commissaire car actually after like 10, 15 minutes, because it was pretty cold, and, you know, wanted to get off our feet and stay warm. So we hopped in the car, and yeah, it was a pretty good atmosphere. Everyone was in a good mood. And, you know, I think it was probably advantageous to the break, I'd say. The whole stopping and the protest, but yeah, never encountered a protest in a race before, so it was a little strange.
Talking about that protest now, I was commentating on a race, so I saw it all live from the first second, the entire race. I felt they gave you a minute less than you had before you stopped. Didn't you get there with like some 8 minutes and then he let it go after 6? I think there was for sure at least a minute you lost because of whatever the commissaires are unable to control it. What's your point of view there?
Yeah, I agree with you. We definitely got robbed there. About 3K before we stopped, we had the latest time check and it said 8 minutes. And then when they stopped us, they were saying 6 minutes 50. And yeah, you can't really argue. There's not much say that you have there, but definitely feel like we got a bit shortchanged there. But then again, also when you stop like that, then once the race gets going, if we just pin it right out of the gun in the break, then we have that 6 minutes 50 seconds to open the gap up more while the peloton was still standing there waiting around. So I think we made that minute back up, but yeah, it would have been nice to start with the 8 instead of the 6 minutes 50.
But how do you do that? How do you get into the break at the World Championships, stop for an hour, jump in the commissaire's car? I don't know what you guys were chatting about, but that must have been pretty funny. But like from the physiological standpoint of being warm and having all those, the adrenaline pumping, glucose going through the roof, and then all of a sudden you stop. Were you thinking about how am I going to start back up from this? I mean, did you know how it feels when you stop for a coffee in the middle of a ride? Like your legs just feel like wood for, 15, 20 minutes again after that. Were you guys like talking about it, or, what was going through your head sitting in the commissaire's car for that long?
Yeah, I mean, we knew it was going to be a hard restart, especially with the main climb on the run-in only came maybe 5K after we had stopped. So it was a pretty fast little downhill section and then straight into a climb. So we definitely knew it was going to be a hard start and that you'd feel the legs a bit on that climb. But I think out of that group, I was maybe one of the better climbers. So I think that also worked in my advantage that I could ease into it a bit more on the climb. But I mean, it was the same for everyone. Everyone was stopped there and everyone kind of had that rude awakening when the race restarted. So for me, I was more just, thinking about getting in, hydration and food. And, that's an extra hour that we were out on the road. So just making sure I wasn't forgetting to eat and drink and just like I would in the race, because, that comes around to bite you in the butt 5 hours later when you're in the final.
So did you had like your coach or sport director coming up to you and go, hey, Kevin, you need to eat, you need to drink this, you need to drink a protein shake or more carbohydrates, or you had it all in your own mind and counting the calories you need, or you had some outside advice since you were sitting there for an hour almost?
Yeah, it was mainly just us in the break, and me eating the food that I had in my pockets, and I got a fresh bottle actually from the Latvian coach came up and he had extra banana and a Coke and some extra gels and stuff for all of us. So yeah, it was everyone was, sharing, and, the coaches and directors from other teams were handing out bottles too. And it was everyone was working well together, because also in the, together in the breakaway, we're all from different nations, but we all wanted to work together to try and make it as deep into the race as we could. So yeah, it was a good little group we had there, and I think we made the most of our break.
Yeah, definitely. But okay, now you're coming on to the circuits. Everybody knew for the last couple months or even a year that this circuit was challenging, to say the least. 40 some odd turns, all the steep climbs, all the technical bits and bobs. When you got on the circuits, did anything change? Like, was it all of a sudden the mentality of, hey, let's stick together as long as we can, or were you already looking for those little weak spots with the guys in the breakaway with you?
I think when we came onto the circuits, we still had about a 5-minute gap. But that was the whole reason I was in the breakaway, to be honest. just knowing those circuits, and especially after I'd pre-ridden the course a couple days before and really seeing how technical it was, and just, it was relentless, and being in the break, I think, was a massive advantage there. And that was my big goal going in the day, to make it up the road. And I think in the long term, it actually saved so much energy, even though we were out front and pushing for that 120K beforehand. The mental stress and nervous energy that everyone else was spending going into those circuits was, costing them a lot of energy too. So, we knew that in that 10K, kind of before we got to the circuit, the peloton would really accelerate. Everyone was basically doing a full lead out to get there in front, still with 150K to go in the race. So we made a bit of an effort there to really pin it and keep the speed high, so we didn't lose too much time, but we expected to lose a minute or so just in that couple K before the circuit. But once we got onto the circuit, we just kept it pretty steady. We didn't really push. I mean, we were still all working well together, and no one was surging or attacking or anything. And, the gap was coming down pretty steadily. Pretty quickly. We were losing about 30 seconds every half lap or so. And I was actually thinking in the break, maybe we should push a bit more now. I thought it was coming down too fast, but every time we'd go through the feed zone, we could see on the big screen, the peloton was already just, in pieces, and all the carnage that was happening, riders attacking and big names attacking too. I mean, I saw Peterson and Alaphilippe on the screen, and I thought, okay, we can just relax. We don't have to stress too much. Even if the race does come back to us a little sooner than I would have liked, the group's already going to be a small one. So yeah, we kept it fairly easy for the first couple laps on the circuit.
Now, we talked about the circuit now already, and more than one rider went to the press and said, I believe this circuit is limit of being too dangerous. Too many corners, too whatever steep up and down hills. What's your opinion on that one?
I mean, my opinion, I loved it, to be honest. I think it was a pretty cool circuit. Having all the fans there in Glasgow and the punchy climbs and, the technical aspect of it, I think it was, definitely changed the dynamic of the race a lot, especially compared to the races that we do the entire season. But I think for World Championships, it was a pretty good course. And I think, if you look back and watch the race, I think it proved a worthy winner. And, in the end, the big favorites were all there, and the race really came down, to who deserved to be a world champion. It wasn't like there was a fluke winner, or, the race was completely changed by luck or anything like that. I think for sure you needed some luck with the corners, and especially the rain made it pretty slippery. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good world championship route.
I mean, it was a great world championship for Team USA. What were your guys' tactics going into that race? Was it for you to be in the break, and then the rest of the guys like Lawson and Larry and the other guys work for Nielsen? Or, give us the rundown of the pre-race tactic.
Yeah, so obviously we didn't have maybe an A-tier favorite. But Nielsen is, proven himself in the one-day races. He's had some great results all year. And, last year or 2 years ago in Leuven, he was fourth. So he was our main leader for the day. And we wanted to have him deep into the final. And the goal for the rest of us was just to try and get up the road and really anticipate the race so that we could be with Nielsen then into the final. And the guys like Will and Larry did a great job to position Nielsen coming into the circuit. And yeah, me being in the break was, our goal was for me to come deep into the race and try and anticipate moves. And, that's why I attacked from the break after a couple laps on the circuit. Our gap had come down to 30 seconds. And, instead of waiting for that group and then trying to follow the big attacks on the climbs where, when Van der Poel and Peterson and those guys are attacking, it's going to be a lot harder to follow than if I can, slip away on my own and then have them ride up to me, which is what ended up happening. And especially on that course, it was a good course to be solo. You could save a lot of energy in the corners, and the climbs were steep enough that, there was not much drafting effect. And I mean, there were really only 3 or 4K on the whole circuit where you could really, get an organized chase going or just really burn yourself out in the wind. So, I think I could anticipate the race a bit with that solo move and try and save some energy and then have that group bridge up to me. And, that was kind of my way of anticipating the race and trying to come deeper into the final for Nielsen to ride up to me.
Was there ever a discussion to shorten the race by 1 or 2 laps because you lost 1 hour time, which is some 2 or maybe 2.5 laps even? Was there ever talks about that to shorten the race so you would still arrive at 6 p.m. and not at 7 p.m. or at 5 p.m.? Or you don't know any about that?
Yeah, initially I had heard some people talking about it, but it was never a like real conversation, I think. I mean, the plan was still to do the full 10 laps, and we started at 9:30 in the morning, and I think we only finished at 5. So I think they planned for a little bit of extra leeway. But yeah, there was never a real conversation to shorten the race, and I think especially at the World Championships, you need that full distance to really to make it count.
Well, watching it on TV at one time, you guys had 150K to go, and then all of a sudden it went up to 164K to go, and I'm like, wait a second, did they just add a lap? Talk about taking away a lap. I was just like, that would be terrible if they all of a sudden added a lap, but it was just obviously a miscalculation on the screen. But I'm interested because they had some amazing camera angles on this circuit. Slow-mo, you could see who was up there and stuff like that. But where do you think the main difference was made on this course? Was it the corners or the climbs?
I think it was the climbs. And, it was, it's funny because even a year ago when I think the course came out, I think the initial thought everyone had was, oh, it's a sprinter's course and, it looks flat on paper and not much climbing overall. But, when you get onto those circuits and you see those climbs, I mean, they were short, but they were pretty steep, and you definitely felt them. And you definitely felt them after 250K. So I think the climbs really made a difference in the end.
And no, you were still in a front group by that time, but I believe second lap of the circuit, Team Denmark went up to the front with I believe 5. I know it's not your team, but what do you think? I still try to understand modern cycling now. What was their plan? They had 5 riders, 150 kilometers to go, which means it's 30 kilometers tempo riding for each one of these 5. How in the name of God did they ever think this could work? And then Mats Pedersen attacks, then Wout van Aert attacks on top of him. Where did they want it to go with 100 or 130 kilometers to go? Is this normal these days, or were you surprised by that as well?
I mean, I think it's, nowadays it just seems normal, and it's, it is crazy, and it doesn't seem, it doesn't seem logical, but I mean, I think the days of the worlds where everyone would set off and, a big break would go and get 15 minutes and everyone would kind of wait for that last 50K. Yeah, those days are gone. And I mean, the racing is just so aggressive now, and it kicks off almost from the gun. I mean, you can't be surprised by anything. And, especially on a course like that and in a race like that, I think, those big guys, they really just want to make the race as hard as possible early on. And then, that really kind of separates the field out pretty quickly and makes a selection, and only the strongest can follow, so that's kind of gets rid of the also teammates for the other guys. If they can get rid of teammates for Belgium and for the Netherlands, I think that was the goal of the Danish riders. And yeah, it's just I mean, yeah, it's crazy, but you don't even, when these guys are attacking with 100K to go, they're not thinking about how far is left or, what's coming up on the course or, that climb that's 3K away. It's just full gas in that moment. And, I love it. I think that's racing, and especially on a course like that, it was just pure racing. It was, I mean, tactics definitely played a role, but at a certain point, it's just, you saw all these favorites throwing haymakers left and right, and you could follow or you couldn't. And that's, that's kind of how it unfolded.
Quick question, Bobby. Well, sorry. When you guys entered the circuit the first time, I don't think in the entire peloton, there were only World Tour riders left. There was nobody there from Azerbaijan or from Vatican City, or they were all gone. in the relatively easy part leading into the circuit, you guys went so fast that every non-super professional was already basically gone by the first time they entered the race. And then first lap, second lap, you saw Kaspar Asgreen abandon. 1 lap later, Peter Sagan, some big names. So yes, the race was super hard. Just wanted to say that. Bobby, go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys were teeing off on each other, and it was fun to watch, but painful at the same time, because I'm like, ooh, this is going to sting the last couple laps for sure. But to our viewers and listeners that don't know, you guys didn't have radios. How were you guys getting communication? Or, you know, those crowds were so massive. Could you hear anybody yelling things to you on the side of the road? Or was it just like, hey, this is raw racing right now. I have no idea what's happening. I'm just going to pull out the big stick and aim for the fence?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit chaotic at times, because you get so used to relying on the radio for information about feed zones and what's coming up on the course, and you know what group's chasing you, who's left in the peloton, and we had no information. Even with the time gap for the break, we only have the chalkboard that the moto holds up, and it could be 10K in between updates on the time gap, so it's not very accurate, and you never really know how much time you have or who's in the group chasing you, how many riders are left, and information like that. So we had in the feed zone, the USA team was trying to hold up a whiteboard with different information, but it was so hard to see, and you go through there so fast that it was almost impossible to make anything out. So I mean, for me, I was really relying on the big screens that are set up around the course, and the live stream that's shown to all the fans there to get updates on what was happening, and to try and get a glimpse of the peloton and see who was left or who was chasing and stuff like that. Because you have no information. So even when our break was about to get caught and we had only 25 seconds, I didn't know if that was to the peloton or to 5 riders or 10 riders or what was going on. So it's definitely pretty chaotic. And it adds an element of unknown to the race that the other races don't have, because normally it's so controlled and so much information and everyone knows what's going on, but here you don't have that, and I think it definitely affects a race.
Talking about the circuit and the steep climbs, what was the gears you guys used for this race?
To be honest, I'm not too big of a tech guy. I'm pretty sure we had a 54-32 on, 32 on the back and the 54-36 in the front, I think. But I'm not 100% sure. I trust the mechanics, and I just try and make the bike go fast.
That was always the difference between Bobby and me. I was so like you. I would always go, hey, what does the team captain go? In my case, Cancellara. Yeah, I do the same. But Bobby was like really precise about all his stuff. And I don't care. I do what Cancellara does. So
come on, we didn't have that many options. I mean, our climbing gear was a 25, maybe a 27. Now, 32s, 34s. I mean, it's totally different ball game. But Kevin, there was a moment when you were away. You said you attacked the brake, and there was this frontal view of you coming through the start finish with the Stars and Stripes jersey on that gave me goosebumps. And I was just wondering, I was like, I wonder what he feels like right now crossing through. And yes, there was a few laps to go. We know that you didn't win the race, but that had to have been a special moment, no?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's every time you pull on the Stars and Stripes and you represent your nation at the Worlds, it's a really big deal. And, getting to race with your national team teammates who, you see at other races throughout the year, but you're always on different teams and racing against each other. It's really cool to race with them. And yeah, to know all your friends and family back home are watching and cheering you on for your country, it was definitely a big honor. And yeah, it was awesome. I mean, the crowds were so supportive, and so many Americans out on the road, and you see the American flag everywhere, and you hear your name, and it really just gives you a ton of adrenaline. So yeah, it was a pretty cool feeling to be out there.
Generally speaking, it seemed like the backing of that whole Super World Championships, which is almost like an Olympics just for cycling in Glasgow, like big support by the crowd, by the audience, right? Or is it just a feeling I had on my TV screen? But it seemed like the people were really loving it. They were really into it, no?
Yeah, no, they definitely were into it, and it was pretty cool. Everyone on the road was into the race, and seemed to know what was going on, and everyone was keen on it, I think. But it did just feel like a normal World Championships, to be honest, because there's been all this talk about the Super Worlds, and it's weird now to be home and already back home from the race and still watching the races on TV, but even seeing or hearing about the mountain bike races and the track races, we didn't see any of that. It just felt like the road race was only, the time trial and the road race were the only events going on, because everything's so spread out and the teams are staying apart. And you don't see the mountain bikers or the BMX guys or the Paralympic track guys. So it definitely just felt like a normal road worlds in that regard. But I think all the events are getting incredible support, and it's definitely gonna be cool to watch on TV now and have experienced it myself and know what those guys are going through.
We'll be back after this short break.
Now back to our chat with Kevin. Well, I tell you, Kevin, we could sit here forever and just ask you more and more questions about the worlds, but we're talking about the end product, you at the World Championships. But I went back and said, okay, how did he prepare this? How did he manage his season? And I have to say I was blown away. And I had to write this down because in January, you started with the Tour of San Juan, February, Vuelta Algarve, March, you did Paris-Nice, then you went into Milan-San Remo, the Cabo Classics, plus the Ardennes Classics. Then finally, you had a month break before starting up with the Tour of Norway, and then in June, the Tour de Suisse, and then the Tour de France. Not to mention that you had, 5 or 6 days of recovery with San Sebastian before the Worlds. So can you please explain, back to Jens's point, about this new generation, how you could take such a big workload, finish your first Tour de France, 6 days later be in the top, in the front, top 20, 21st in a hard race like Classic San Sebastian, and then a few days after that be in the front in probably one of the hardest races ever, according to some of the guys that finished on the podium.
Yeah, it's been, I think I'm at 62 race days now for the year, which is way more than, I think I already beat my previous race day record by about 20 days, I think. So it has been a long season already, but I feel pretty fresh actually. And I think I had a nice kind of build up into the start of the season. Kind of got the European races kicking off with Algarve and then Paris-Nice, and the one-day classics were, I got a bit of a cold and flew there, and those didn't exactly go to plan, but after the Ardennes I was able to take a bit of a break. I went back home to the US to take a month off from racing, take a couple days off the bike. I actually got COVID after Liège, and then kind of restart my training again, get a good 3-week block in back home before heading to Tour Norway, which kind of helped me take my form up another step to Swiss, which kind of led me into the Tour in a really good way. And the Tour was kind of the goal the whole season. From December camp already, I was looking at that as a big objective, and with the team wanting to make sure I came there in the best possible shape. And I think luckily with Norway and Swiss, and I was able to stay healthy and avoid any crashes and really recover from those races so that I could go into the Tour in some of my best shape, best form ever. And I had no idea what to expect, to be honest, because I started the Tour last year, but unfortunately I broke my collarbone on stage 8. So I'd never done a race longer than 8 days, and going into a Grand Tour, it's a big unknown. 3 weeks of racing full gas every day, big volume, and once I got into that second week, every day was just an unknown. I'd wake up and wasn't sure how I'd feel or how I'd feel on the bike. And, going into that third week, there's some big mountain stages coming up, but I was, I think I surprised myself a bit with how well I was able to recover and bounce back every day. And especially in the third week, I was, setting some of my all-time power records. So I think that was a big kind of eye-opener to me on how much load my body could take and, how well I could handle that kind of racing. And yeah, after the tour, I, just had a week with my girlfriend here in the Costa Brava in Spain, and, recovered really well, soaked up the tour, had a few training days to kind of keep the legs moving, and then went to San Sebastian and had the best legs of my life there. And then at Worlds this past week, and I had even better legs. So it's just kind of been this like stair step since the tour where I've just, felt really good, felt like I've recovered, and, every race I seem to be taking a step up. So it's given me a lot of confidence, and, I'm still chasing that elusive first pro win and, really that kind of, headlining result to really be the cherry on top of all the work that's been put in. But yeah, I mean, the numbers that I've seen and the feeling I've had in these big races, I mean, it's given me a lot of confidence. And I think, I've definitely grown a lot this season.
Coming out of a Grand Tour strong is a very good quality to have. So it's really promising. That's a really good quality to have. But at the Tour de France, I was there for Eurosport GCN on a motorbike in the middle week. And I felt so sorry for you guys the day Romain Bardet crashed. And there was a bit of confusion. When I was there on my bike, we stopped relatively close to it because everybody had to stop after the crash. So I looked at Romain and went, oh, I don't know if he can keep going. And then they let us all go past the crash site. And then I caught, on my motorbike, of course, all of you guys. You all waited for him. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think he's keep going. And you all wait for him. I felt so sorry. That must have been a terrible, hard day for you guys. I mean, mentally to lose Romain Bardet, and also physically, because then you were all dropped and had to chase back without even Romain on your wheel. Wasn't that a terrible day? We can talk about better things in a second, but I felt so sorry for you guys on that day.
Yeah, that was a brutal day. I mean, especially for the team. Our big goal was, to go to the Tour and to do a good GC result with Romain and try and fight for the podium and, be in the top 5 in Paris. And I was 2 wheels behind him when he crashed, and it was just a super high speed corner. Everyone locked up the brakes, and yeah, he went down super hard. And, I stopped immediately, and as soon as I looked in his eyes, I could see that, he had a concussion, and he was responding, but he wasn't, fully there. And I think it was pretty clear that he wasn't gonna keep racing in that moment. And yeah, the break was still going, and in that moment, the race stops for our team, for a couple minutes while we're trying to figure out what to do. But in the front of the race, they're still going full gas. And that day was especially brutal. I think a breakaway never even really went away that day. Jumbo just went full gas the whole day. And once it was clear that Romain was done, I tried to chase back, and I almost made it back to the front group, but then the race completely exploded, and it was a tough day, just rolling into the finish with the Gruppetto, and knowing you lost your leader, and that the rest of the races, your goals are going to have to change. It was a pretty rough day.
Rough days happen in the sport a lot. You found out on stage 8 of the Tour de France last year when you broke your collarbone. You went through this with Romain Bardet. What was the highlight? What was the positive, magic moment? We all know you're in a purple patch of form right now, and you should ride that wave all the way to the beach. And maybe we'll talk about your program coming up afterwards. But what was your highlight of the 2023 Tour after having to deal with losing your leader?
I think for me, the highlight was having my family and, my mom and dad, my sister, my girlfriend, they all came out to support me, and seeing them on the side of the road was pretty cool. It's, especially after last year on stage 8 was actually the day my parents had flown over from the US last year was the day I crashed and broke my collarbone. So they had just arrived, and we're going to follow the race, and then it was over already. So I was definitely, leaving the tour early like that was really, something that kind of stayed in the back of my mind the whole winter, the whole off season. I was thinking about the tour, coming back and making it to Paris, and finishing the tour, rolling onto the Champs-Élysées was pretty iconic. I mean, I think it's a big moment for any cyclist, and to kind of put those demons to bed that I had faced last year with having to DNF on stage 8, that was really special for me, and I think was kind of the crowning achievement of a tour that results wise was pretty barren for our team. After losing Bardet, and then we also had a good sprint train there with Sam Welsford, who we really were trying to go for stages with, and we couldn't quite get it to click, and that looks, results wise, it wasn't the best year we've ever had, but we had a really good group of guys at that tour, and everyone got on really well. We all fought for each other. Everyone gave their all every day, and I think when we rolled into Paris, we were proud of the effort we put in, and especially for me personally, I was proud to make it to Paris, because it was felt like a long year kind of waiting and looking forward to that tour. And always in the back of your mind, you're thinking, there's so many crashes happening every day, guys getting sick, all this, and you're just thinking, man, I can't leave the tour again. Like, this year I have to finish, and that was always kind of motivating me and keeping me going. So rolling into the Champs-Élysées really was special.
Yeah, and you got family. Ask you a question, because what he just said blows my mind and goes back to your question about this new generation. He just told us that he's been thinking about the Tour de France. He's not even 23 yet, and that's his objective for the year. And in our time, you didn't even have a chance to do the Tour de France in your early 20s. So that's just another example. These teams are already giving this sort of responsibility, this honor of being pre-selected for the Tour de France in December in their early 20s. It blows me away.
Yes, it does. When I was a late neo-pro. I was 27 when I actually had my first contract. And I was not on a plan for the tour. I made myself into the team, but I was not on a plan for that. Not as a neo-pro, as a young kid. But it seemed to work these days, right? I mean, if you look at all the results these young superstars have, like Pidcock and Wout van Aert and Pogacar, it seemed to work, right? These days, cycling is a sport for young kids. Back in our days, it was more, you gotta be at least 28 or 29 until 33, and then you're already old and retire. Totally different world. But I also have to say, these kids, this generation, they go so much better and it's more spectacular than we ever did in our days, Bobby, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the youth that is being used, the leaders, you were the second or third youngest starter of the Tour de France this year. That just wasn't even a topic back in our day. But it's great to see, and it's great to see that you obviously come from a lineage of cycling. And just a side note, that's so awesome that your parents got to come back and actually watch you in Paris instead of taking you to a hospital on the 8th stage. But the lineage that you've had, your father was a cyclist. You got onto Axel Merckx's team, who it's his 50th birthday, I believe, today, or 51st. So we got to wish Axel happy birthday. You get on a great team like Sunweb and then DSM. But Kevin, how did it start for you? When did it click that this is something that you wanted to do, knowing now that you're 8 years into this massive experience of this young career and got most, if not all, of your career left ahead of you? But when did you say, this is what I want to dedicate my life to?
Pretty early, I think. I mean, I was always riding bikes. And like you mentioned, I mean, my dad came from, he raced when he was a junior. He actually grew up in South Africa, but his dad was from Belgium and immigrated to South Africa in his early 20s. So cycling was always something that was in his family. And, when he started racing, he moved to Belgium and lived there for a couple of years, racing in the junior and amateur circuit. He never turned pro, but he was a pretty good junior, and especially on the track, he had a silver medal in the Junior Worlds in '91, I think, when they were in Colorado Springs. He, even though he never made it pro, he was still loved mountain biking and riding on the road. And when I came along, that was just something my dad and I always did together. And on the weekends, go out for a mountain bike ride. We're really lucky to have some incredible trails near our house, and we just go for 5, 10, 15-mile rides, and just slowly, I always wanted to do more and do bigger rides, put loops together, and we had this local mountain bike race called Over the Hump, and actually, I think it was in 2011. Peter Sagan came out to the race with Cannondale, I think, because he was riding for Cannondale at the time, and they were one of the sponsors that put on this race series. And I have no idea why he was in Southern California at that time, but I think it was just for a sponsor engagement. But he came out to this race, and at the time I didn't know anything about road racing or the World Tour or even the Tour de France, but it was kind of this local grassroots mountain bike race where I picked up racing, and ever since then I've kind of had the bug for it. And like you mentioned, I've had I'm very super grateful to have had the chance to ride on some amazing teams like Action and Lux with Roy Nickman, and even on the mountain bike a program called Whole Athlete. So I was very lucky to have good support ever since I was a junior. And it's really, as an American rider trying to come over and race in Europe, it's crucial. And I think the amazing programs that do exist do a great job, but it's unfortunate there's not more, because there's so many kids racing in the US that just need that one chance or one opportunity to come and make it a career for themselves. But it's really it's a hard pathway, but I was lucky to have some help along the way.
So now we talked about how you get into cycling, your great year you had so far. Where do you see Kevin Vermaerke in 2 years or next year or 3 years? You want to try a little bit of GC or breakaway specialist for the long one-day classics. Where do you see your future?
I think I've had a couple of years now on the World Tour. This is already my third season, so I start to feel like I'm getting a little. I've been around the block a couple times, but at the same time, I still have so much to figure out and physically to develop, I think. So DSM has put a lot of faith in me and trust, and they have a good program set up for me where I can kind of find what races suit me, what races don't suit me. And I think I kind of see myself going down a pathway of Ardennes Classics, kind of hard one-day race specialist, and hopefully winning some stages at the Tour or other Grand Tours, and also being versatile enough to help a GC leader or help out in a sprint train, and kind of be an asset at any race I go to. I think that's something that's pretty valuable these days, when you can see guys like Pogacar, they can win every type of race. It doesn't matter if it's flat or if it's if it goes up the Tourmalet. I mean, they can just do it on any terrain, and I think that's kind of a skill that a lot of young and up-and-coming cyclists are having, where they can be versatile on any terrain, and that's something that I also want to try and use to my advantage.
Yeah, you want to go back a step. I have a question for you, because we had Matteo Jorgensen on the podcast, and he mentioned the support that he got from USA Cycling to kind of get his career started, and we kind of glossed over that, because I believe that you were also part of that generation of guys that got a lot of support by USA Cycling and actually lived over in Belgium for a while, right? Can you talk a little bit of the importance of that? Because when I was a junior, we had amazing support from the United States Cycling Federation, the USCF, which is now known as USA Cycling. And there was some amazing junior development. And it just seems like when that program is well funded and they bring riders over to the US and bring them to that house, and I think it's in Sittard, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That good things happen. Guys like you, Matteo, Larry Warbass, the names go on and on. Tell me a little bit about your support that you've received from USA Cycling over the years, as well as in this past World Championships.
Yeah, USA Cycling definitely played a big part. I mean, I remember when I was still a 15, 16, I was on a local team out of Southern California called Velosport. And, they had a little 3-day training camp every winter for the guys on the team. And that year at the camp, Billy Innes came and gave a talk to all of the young kids that were there. And, he kind of just explained his role as a kind of director of the national team and, how we could get the chance to go ride in Europe. And, he explained these things called kermesses and, he kind of explained what racing was like in Europe. And, that was all brand new news to all the kids in that room at the time. And I think he, just him kind of coming to that camp and giving that talk, it really, I kind of see that as a pivotal moment in my career, just because it opened my eyes to what USA Cycling was doing and the opportunities that were out there. So at the end of that year, I was able to go on a 3-week trip to Belgium with USA Cycling for 15, 16s. And there we just did, 2 kermesses a week. And, we stayed in Sittard and trained and it was kind of like summer camp, the first time away from home over in Europe. And, you're with your friends and yeah, it was a good time. And, the racing was brand new and super hard. And, I think especially, coming from the US, I think you see, especially in juniors that, the US riders have a tendency to be super strong. So, I mean, we went over there and I think, the first kermesse I did, I crashed in the first corner, and then the second kermesse the next day, I think the US guys went 1 through 5 or something. We all just rode away off the front. So it was, it's definitely an eye-opening trip to, what racing was like in Europe, what it was like to live away from home for the first time, how to pack your bag to go to a race, how to keep your bike clean. Billy Innes really did a good job of kind of just, supporting us and teaching us, when we're still young kids, I mean, 15-year-old kids going over to Europe, it's a big deal at the time. And that kind of sets us up for going into the juniors when we'd go over, and then, you're doing big races, like Pays de Vaud and Trofeo Carlsberg and these big junior nations cups where there's guys from all over Europe and guys that are, already going to big under 23 teams. And, then you're thinking about the world championships, and it all just kind of builds on top of each other and just gets bigger and bigger. But USA Cycling did a really good job of supporting us and getting us over there and just giving us the exposure to get into those Nation Cup races, because that's really the only way you can see if you're good enough, coming from the US, because we just don't have that same level of competition. And those are the races that the pro teams look at to pick their riders. So it really, it's important to go over there and show yourself. And that's what USA Cycling helps the riders do. And like you said, they have that base set up in Sittard, where they've been based out of for a couple of years now. And obviously with COVID, the past few years, it was, I think they had a dip there where there were a few years where funding was a bit dry. But I mean, this past year or two, I think they've stepped things back up, and the junior and under 23 programs are running again. And even at the Worlds, we had really, really good support. We had, a nice, set up there where the whole road team was staying, and we had, good support with Cooks and Soigneurs, and TJ Van Garden was our director. So yeah, they definitely put in a lot of effort, and especially for the young guys, it's incredible, those opportunities.
So you would say that all that living over there, training over there, did lead into you winning 2019 Liege-Bastogne-Liege, right, for the sport category? There would be like some logic steps leading up to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as a junior, I was always in that top, kind of top 5, top 10 zone. I didn't win too many races when I was a junior, but I was always kind of at the front of the race. And then when I graduated into Axel Merckx's program and went up to the under 23 races, I really had no idea what to expect from the level, because you go from the juniors where everyone's 17 or 18, and then now, you're doing races where you could be racing guys that are 22, which seems pretty old when you're, when you're a 18-year-old kid. So yeah, it was a big change, but, I just was able to integrate into the new level of racing pretty quick. And yeah, I think Liège was was in April, so only a month or two into my season, and I was able to pull off a pretty big win straight off the bat as a first year under 23. So that really kind of gave me the confidence that I needed to know that I could perform at that level.
Yeah, no one wins Liege-Bastogne-Liege in any category without having the talent to do it. So congratulations on that. But I now need to go back to that purple patch. You're feeling good. You're still rolling. Do you have any more races planned, or are you going to come back and do the Maryland Cycling Classic, the races up in Canada, or are you going to stay over in Europe?
Yeah, I've got a few. I think I've got about 8 race days left for the year. So I won't be doing the Maryland Classic, but I am going to go over for Quebec and Montreal. My next race is Bämer Cyclassics and the Deutschland Tour over in Germany, which I'm sure Jens knows pretty well.
I'll be there.
Cool. Yeah, I'll see you there. And so that's next up for me. I think the Bämer Cyclassics is on the 20th. So I have just under 2 weeks until that race, and then after that it's straight over to Canada for the 2 one-day races, and then after that I'll come back to Europe and finish my season off with the Italian one-day races at the end of the year. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. I think all these races are going to suit me pretty well now, especially Quebec and Montreal. I'm really looking forward to, and I'm just taking it day by day and doing my training and trying to recover properly. And we'll see how long this form lasts after the tour. But I'm pretty motivated. I mean, I think I really, a lot of guys were talking about how they were, so tired, or they just wanted to go home after the tour. But I think I was really motivated when I left, and I just wanted to get back training right away. So I think, these having some goals at the end of the season, like Quebec and Montreal, and these races that suit me pretty well. It's kind of kept that fire in my belly for the rest of the season. So I'm pretty looking forward to these races that are coming up now.
Hey, Yenzi, he just said the T word after the Tour de France twice. Training.
I know.
What? You actually want to go out and train? Like, for us, it was rest or race. That was it. Like, there was no more training days. There was no more 40-20s. There was no more intervals. It was like, I'm racing or I'm resting. That's it. But yeah, you are definitely in the purplest of purple patches if you have the morale to go out training this time of year. So good on you, man.
Yeah, and I think it definitely helped having San Sebastian so soon after the tour, and then the Worlds a week later. It didn't really give me time to come home and think about it too much. I was unpacking my bag from the tour, and then the next minute I was packing it again to head off to San Sebastian. So I think having that goal or that objective kind of in the near term right after the tour was good for me, because it kept me motivated and kind of kept me on track, and had a just doing those 200 plus kilometer races. That's just more than enough training. So I think that really helped me just keep ticking over after the tour.
8 race days left. Where will you go on holiday in the off season? Just an easy question now for you.
I'm not sure yet. I haven't officially decided where I'll be heading on a vacation, but after Lombardia, I'll head back to the U.S. Head back home to Los Angeles, and that's about as much vacation as I need, to be honest. I mean, after spending the whole most of the season in Europe, just going home seems like a vacation. So yeah, I'll just soak it up and spend some time with the family and go see some old friends and enjoy the weather in LA, and just relax. That's all I need.
Non-cycling related, what does the number 46 mean to you? Non-cycling. Because I know exactly what it is, because I'm a big fan of that as well.
I'm just curious how you knew about that or came up with that number, but 46 is a big number for me and my dad. Obviously 46 is Valentino Rossi, the most iconic MotoGP racer of all time, and that's as long as I can remember, my dad and I were always watching MotoGP races on the weekend, and 46 was always the number, whether it was soccer or baseball or any school event where I had to choose a number, it was always 46. And yeah, that's my number. But how did you know about that?
Well, we know that you're a fan of Valentino Rossi and Il Dottore. He always had the number 46, and I followed that for a while. What is he, 9 times world champion in all categories? I mean, like you say, he's got to be the Eddie Merckx of motorsports or of motor racing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of him as well.
Well, after your long, hard, successful season, you deserve that rest, and you deserve that rest right now as well. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on Bobby and Jens today. It's been an absolute pleasure watching you, talking to you, and just wish you all the best of luck in your future.
And also from my side, thanks a million for being our guest. It was awesome.
No worries. Thanks, Jens and Bobby. I really appreciate it. And yeah, have a good one, guys.
Well, that's all our time for this week. Huge thanks to Kevin for being our guest.
Thanks for listening. Please give us a 5-star review and share us with your friends.
The show was a Velo production in association with Shock Giraffe. The producer was Mark Payne, and this episode was edited by Kirk Warner.
Remember, you can watch this and every episode of Bobby and Jens in video on the Outside Watch YouTube channel.
The World Championships course has been called the hardest in history. What is the hardest day on a bike you have witnessed? Let us know by messaging us at Bobby and Jens on Twitter and Instagram.